They had a fleet built to conquer galaxies. They had weapons that could level a city block. And their scans said San Diego was hosting the largest concentration of armed, costumed, battle-ready humans on the entire planet. So Commander Kael'Vox made his move. What he did not know was that it was Comic-Con, and every single one of those soldiers was just there for the free swag. Stick around, because this invasion is about to become the worst career decision in the history of the Zarnal Empire. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment if you think aliens would survive Hall H. Let's begin. For light years above Earth, the Zarnal Scout cruiser vessel of Judgment drifted in silent orbit, its sensors sweeping the Pacific coastline of North America. Commander Kael'Vox Thurn stood on the bridge with his 4 gray hands folded behind his back, watching a live feed of the planet's surface scroll across the display in front of him. He had conquered 11 worlds in his career. He had broken 3 separate resistance movements before breakfast. And nothing in his long, illustrious record had prepared him for what his scanners were about to show him. His tactical officer, a thin, nervous Zarnal named Threll, tapped at his console and frowned. "Commander, I'm detecting a massive gathering of armed humans in a coastal city called San Diego." Kael'Vox turned slowly. "Armed how?" "Blasters, swords, battle armor, full military exoskeletons. Some carry what appear to be war hammers the size of small vehicles." Threll zoomed in the readout. "There are also multiple individuals dressed as previous alien invaders, green skin, antennae. One is dressed as what our historical files call a xenomorph." Kael'Vox's eye ridges lifted. For the first time in decades, the commander felt something close to respect. "They already know about us. They prepare replicas of alien forms for training exercises." He straightened his shoulders. "This is not a primitive fishing town, Threll. This is a garrison, a proud one. One that celebrates its enemies before it destroys them." Threll hesitated. "Sir." The readings also show thousands of humans exchanging small pieces of laminated cardboard for entry into a large building. "Ritual sacrifice of identification," Kael'Vox said with total confidence. "A society this organized deserves a formal introduction, not a sneak attack." He turned toward the viewport, where the blue curve of the planet rolled beneath them. "We will not strike this world like cowards. We will land in the heart of their gathering, present ourselves as conquerors, and demand their surrender before their strongest warriors." Threll's antennae twitched. "Commander, might I suggest a smaller, quieter approach first? Fear is inefficient, Threll. We will begin with overwhelming presence." Kael'Vox turned to his crew. "Prepare the landing craft. We descend at their gathering point. San Diego will remember this day as the beginning of Zarnal rule." Down on the ground, none of this registered as anything unusual, because down on the ground, it was the second day of Comic-Con. And San Diego had already seen far stranger things walk past the convention center that morning. Jake Sullivan, 26 years old, born and raised in Ohio, stood in line outside Hall H wearing a full bounty hunter costume he had built himself out of thrifted motorcycle parts and spray paint. He had been in that line since 4 in the morning. He had a granola bar in one pocket and a foldable stool in the other, and he had exactly zero interest in anything that was not related to getting a good seat for the panel. Behind him, his friend Sarah Collins adjusted the wings on her homemade Dragon Rider costume and checked her phone. "You seeing this online? People are saying there's a new marketing stunt happening near the bay. Some studio dropped actual props out there, life-size ship replicas." Jake barely looked up. "Cool. Probably for that new invasion movie. The trailer looked insane. They said it looked too real. Everything at this con looks too real. Remember the guy in the mechanical spider costume that almost took out a lighting rig?" Sarah laughed and put her phone away. Neither of them noticed the actual alien landing craft descending through the marine layer 3 blocks away, silent and smooth. Its underside glowing a soft blue that several nearby fans immediately assumed was a drone light show for an unannounced game reveal. Frank Dalton had worked convention center security for 11 years. He had seen grown men cry over exclusive variant comic covers. He had seen a costume malfunction turn into a viral video with 40 million views. He had personally escorted 3 separate people dressed as the same obscure anime villain out of the same hallway in a single afternoon. Frank believed, deep in his bones, that there was nothing left that could genuinely surprise him at Comic-Con. He was standing near the loading dock behind the West Building, sipping lukewarm coffee, when the back doors of a matte black aircraft the size of a school bus folded open with a low mechanical hiss. And 6 tall gray figures in dark battle armor stepped out onto the pavement. Frank looked at them, he looked at his coffee, he looked back at them. "Nice suits," he said. "You guys with the panel for that alien invasion movie. Because if you don't have a badge, I can't let you through this door, no matter how good the practical effects are." The lead figure raised a device that translated its words into flat, mechanical English. "We are the Zarnal Advance Force. We have come to claim this world." Frank nodded slowly, unimpressed. "Right, cool line, very in character, badge." The alien paused. Behind him, Threll leaned toward Kael'vox and whispered something urgent. Kael'vox lowered his translator device and stared at the human in front of him. A human who was, by every visible metric, completely calm in the face of an armed alien delegation. This was not the reaction the Zarnal Empire had trained for. Commander Kael'vox stood very still, running through every combat scenario his officer training had prepared him for. Panic, surrender, aggression, prayer. He had rehearsed responses to all of them. He had not rehearsed a response to a human security guard asking him for a laminated badge. "We do not require identification," Kael'vox said through his translator. "We are conquerors." Frank Dalton took a slow sip of his coffee. "Buddy, everybody out here thinks they're something. I had a guy yesterday tell me he was a certified Jedi Knight because he took an online course. You want in that door, you get a badge like everybody else." Threll leaned toward his commander, voice low and uncertain. "Sir, perhaps this individual does not fully grasp the nature of our arrival. Then we will make it clear." Kael'vox raised his weapon, a sleek black rifle that hummed with a faint violet charge, and pointed it directly at Frank's chest. "Stand aside, human, or be destroyed." Frank glanced at the weapon with the mild curiosity of a man examining a new food truck menu. That a real prop or one of those high-end 3D printed replicas? The detailing's actually pretty solid. You buy that off a con vendor or commission it. Kael'vox's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, an involuntary Zarnal reaction to complete confusion. Before he could respond, a passing group of teenagers in matching space marine armor spotted the 6 aliens standing near the loading dock and immediately began filming. "Yo, that's insane detail," one of them shouted, already walking closer with his phone raised. "Is this for the new invasion movie? Can we get a picture?" Within 90 seconds, a small crowd had gathered near the loading dock, phones raised. All of them, assuming the 6 armored aliens, were part of an elaborate marketing activation for an unannounced film. Kael'vox found himself surrounded not by fear, but by enthusiastic photographers asking him to turn slightly to the left for better lighting. "This is not part of an entertainment product," Kael'vox announced loudly, hoping the seriousness of his tone would finally register. "We are the advance force of the Zarnal Empire, and this planet is now under our authority." A woman near the front laughed and clapped. "The commitment to the bit is unreal. You guys stay in character the whole con." Threll pulled his commander aside, speaking low and fast. "Sir, I do not believe these humans understand that this is real." "They will understand," Kael'vox growled, "when we demonstrate our strength." Inside the convention center, word had already started to spread differently than the commander intended. A marketing executive named Todd Bennett, working the promotional booth for a rival studio's science fiction franchise, had heard about life-size alien props with incredible practical effects wandering near the loading dock. And he had immediately assumed a competing studio was running an unauthorized guerrilla marketing stunt on convention grounds. Todd jogged out to the loading dock with his badge lanyard bouncing against his chest, phone already dialing his creative director. "Guys, I need you to see this." Somebody built full animatronic alien suits with actual weapon effects, and they're just walking around outside like it's nothing. This is either genius or a massive liability. He reached the crowd, pushed through gently, and looked directly at Kael'vox with the enthusiastic expression of a man who smelled an opportunity. "This is incredible work. Are you guys with a studio or is this independent?" Because our panel in Hall H has an empty slot in 40 minutes, and I would love to get you in front of that audience." Kael'Vox stared at the human in front of him. A human who was offering him a stage, instead of surrendering to him. For the first time since childhood training exercises, the commander felt something dangerously close to being outmaneuvered by kindness and confusion combined. Threll's voice came through the private channel, quiet and worried. "Commander, should we proceed with the assault?" Kael'Vox looked at the phones raised around him, at Todd's eager expression. At Frank Dalton, still waiting by the door with his hand out for a badge that did not exist. "No," he said slowly. "First, we will see what this invitation offers us. Then we will conquer them from the inside." It was, without question, the worst strategic decision the Zarnal Empire had ever recorded. 40 minutes later, Commander Kael'Vox stood backstage in Hall H, listening to 8,000 humans scream with excitement on the other side of a heavy black curtain. And he had never in his military career felt less in control of a situation. Todd Bennett clipped a small microphone to the collar of Kael'Vox's armor without asking permission first. "Okay, big guy, when the moderator introduces the surprise reveal, you walk out, you do your thing, maybe raise the weapon prop a little for dramatic effect. And the crowd is going to lose their minds. This is going to be the moment everybody talks about online tonight." "This is not a prop," Kael'Vox said flatly. Todd laughed and patted his shoulder plate. "Love the commitment, seriously. Stay in character the whole time, that's exactly what we want." Threll stood nearby with 2 other Zarnal soldiers. All 3 of them watching their commander get physically arranged by enthusiastic strangers for what they were calling content. Threll leaned toward Kael'Vox and whispered, "Sir, this does not appear to be going according to any invasion protocol in our training manuals." "I am aware, Threll. Should we simply fire on them now?" "While we are backstage," Kael'Vox considered it. Then he considered the 8,000 voices beyond the curtain, the security personnel stationed at every exit, and the fact that his own troops had, in the span of one afternoon, been fitted with lapel microphones by a man in a branded polo shirt. "We will assess the crowd first. A demonstration in front of this many witnesses could either break their spirit completely, or it could go poorly if their numbers overwhelm us." The moderator's voice boomed out beyond the curtain. "You are not ready for this next reveal. Please welcome, straight from an undisclosed production, our special guests." The curtain pulled back, and Kael'Vox walked out onto the stage with his 3 soldiers behind him. Into a wall of light, and noise the likes of which no Zarnal combat simulation had ever recreated. 8,000 humans rose to their feet, screaming, phones raised, camera flashes sparking across the room like a localized meteor shower. Kael'Vox raised his weapon on instinct, the same motion that had ended resistance movements on 11 separate worlds. The crowd roared louder. Someone in the front row shouted, "The detail on that rifle is unreal," and started a chant that spread across the entire hall within seconds. Threll's voice crackled through the private channel, thin with disbelief. "Commander, they are cheering." "I am aware, Threll." A young woman near the stage lifted a sign that read, "We love the invasion saga," and Kael'Vox stared at it for a long moment, his translator failing to produce any explanation that made tactical sense. He had expected panic. He had trained for panic. Panic he understood. This endless, thunderous celebration was something his species had never once accounted for in 11 successful campaigns. Todd appeared at the edge of the stage, gesturing enthusiastically for Kael'Vox to move towards center stage. "Perfect, now hit your mark and give them a little more of the weapon glow. The audience is loving it." Kael'Vox lowered his rifle slightly. He turned to Threll, speaking through a private frequency only his own crew could hear. "This world does not fear strength. It applauds it." Backstage, a convention volunteer nervously approached one of the Zarnal soldiers with a clipboard. "I just need you guys to sign a standard release form for use of your likeness in any promotional materials," she said, holding out a pen. The soldier stared at the pen, at the form, and then at Kael'Vox, awaiting orders that no training manual had ever prepared him to receive. Meanwhile, in the 3rd row of the audience, a physics professor named Doug Harmon sat very still, his excitement from moments earlier draining slowly out of his face. Doug had spent 30 years studying propulsion theory and energy signatures. And something about the faint violet hum coming off that prop weapon did not match anything he recognized from known special effects technology. He leaned toward his colleague. "That's not a light rig effect, that's an actual particle discharge pattern," his colleague laughed. "Doug, it's Comic-Con." "Everything looks real if you squint." Doug did not laugh back. He pulled out his phone and began recording every frame of the stage, because somewhere deep in his analytical mind, a very quiet, very persistent alarm had just started ringing. And it would not stop until someone finally listened. By early evening, Commander Kael'Vox had done something no Zarnal officer had ever accomplished in the Empire's recorded history. He had failed to conquer a single human and simultaneously trended online in over 40 countries. Clips of his stage appearance had spread across every platform within hours, most captioned with jokes about a rival studio's marketing budget. Fans debated whether the actor inside the suit had a name, whether he would appear at future panels, and whether the weapon effects were CGI added afterward or genuinely built into the costume. Nobody anywhere entertained the idea that the footage was real. Kael'Vox stood at the edge of the exhibit hall roof, looking down at the sea of costumed humans still filling the streets below, and felt something he had never once felt during a successful campaign. Humiliation without a single shot fired in true combat. Threll joined him, his voice careful. "Commander, orders from the fleet. They are asking why contact has not resulted in submission. Tell them," Kael'Vox said slowly, "that this species does not respond to strength in the way our records predicted. They are requesting escalation, sir." Kael'Vox's jaw tightened. Down below, Doug Harmon was pushing through the crowd toward a convention center security office, phone in hand, trying to explain to anyone who would listen that the costume weapon from the earlier panel had produced a genuine energy signature that matched no known manufacturing process on Earth. Nobody at the security desk took him seriously until Frank Dalton, walking past on a break, overheard the words energy signature and stopped cold. "You said the weapon those alien guys were holding was giving off real readings?" Frank asked. Doug nodded urgently. "I've spent my entire career studying propulsion physics." "That was not a special effect." Frank's mind flashed back to the loading dock, to the calm, oddly serious tone of the actor who had told him with complete conviction that Earth was now under new authority. Frank had brushed it off as another overcommitted cosplayer. Now, standing in front of a visibly shaken physics professor, that memory suddenly felt very different. "I need to call this in," Frank said, already reaching for his radio. Above the convention center, the sky shifted. A low, deep vibration rolled through the marine air, rattling windows along the harbor, and thousands of phones tilted upward at once as a massive shape began descending through the evening clouds. It was the Zarnal harvester ship, nearly the size of a football stadium, its underside glowing violet as it dropped toward the bay. For one long, breathless moment, the crowd below fell completely silent. Then someone screamed with excitement instead of fear. "They brought the actual mothership." "This is the best panel reveal in Comic-Con history." The silence shattered into a roar of applause. Drone photographers surged toward the waterline for a better angle. Cosplay groups pointed their prop weapons upward for dramatic photos, laughing and posing beneath the descending ship as if it were a scheduled fireworks show. A live stream titled "Best Marketing Stunt Ever" climbed past 200,000 viewers in minutes. On board the Harvester, Kael'Vox watched the reaction feed with a slowly rising sense of dread. "They are not fleeing," he said. "They are photographing it." Threll's voice shook. "Sir, Fleet Command is asking if the population has surrendered." "Tell them," Kael'Vox said, staring down at thousands of cheering faces, "that this population does not appear to understand the concept of surrender." Colonel Mark Whitfield arrived at the harbor 12 minutes later. Called in after local air traffic control reported an unidentified aircraft, the size of a stadium, hovering over a densely populated event. He stepped out of his vehicle, looked up at the glowing shape in the sky, then looked at the thousands of costumed civilians cheering beneath it, and immediately understood that this situation was going to be very difficult to explain in any official report. "Somebody tell me right now," Whitfield said into his radio, "whether that thing up there is a drone show or an actual incursion." Because those are two very different Tuesdays. Frank Dalton reached him first, breathless. Colonel, I think it's real. I talked to one of them myself. He told me Earth was under new management. Whitfield stared up at the glowing ship, then down at Doug Harmon's phone footage of the weapon's energy signature, then back up at the ship again. Well, he said quietly, that is going to complicate my evening. Commander Kaelvox made his final decision from the bridge of the Harvester, watching the impossible scene below through every available sensor. 8,000 humans who had cheered his arrival on a stage. Thousands more who had photographed his warship as though it were scheduled entertainment. A single security guard who had asked him for identification instead of surrendering. Nothing about this campaign matched any successful invasion in Zarnal history, and Kaelvox understood that the only path left was total, undeniable force. Activate the gravity beam, he ordered. We will show them this is not a performance. The Harvester's underside opened, and a wide column of violet light swept down across the harbor, lifting parked cars, folding chairs, and an unattended hot dog cart into a slow, spinning orbit above the crowd. For the second time that evening, the response was not fear. This effect is insane, someone shouted from the crowd, phone held high. Are they doing a live stunt show now? Colonel Whitfield watched a folding table drift past at head height and made a decision that would define the rest of his career. Everybody get back from the beam, he shouted, pushing through the crowd himself. This is not a stunt, this is a real incident. Move now. For the first time all day. The tone of the crowd began to shift. Whitfield's voice, backed by actual security personnel forming a perimeter, carried the kind of authority that finally cut through the noise. People began to step back from the light, phones still raised, but expressions shifting from delight to genuine concern. Doug Harmon reached Whitfield's side, breathless. Colonel, that beam is generating a gravitational distortion. If it widens, it could start pulling structural elements from nearby buildings. Whitfield nodded once, keyed his radio, and called for an immediate evacuation of the harbor front. But evacuating 8,000 costumed convention attendees, many of them carrying oversized foam weapons, mechanical costume parts, and battery packs the size of car batteries, was never going to be simple or quiet. What happened next was not a coordinated military response. It was several thousand overprepared hobbyists reacting to an actual crisis with the only tools they had brought with them. A group of fans wearing fully wired, motorized mech suits, built for a costume competition earlier that day, found their suits' internal battery systems suddenly interfering with the Harvester's beam frequency, sending a cascade of electrical feedback rippling up into the ship's undercarriage. A drone operator live-streaming the event accidentally flew his unit directly into the beam sensor array while trying to get a better angle, scrambling its targeting calibration entirely. And a cosplayer dressed as a classic movie alien, carrying a genuinely oversized prop cannon rigged with a theatrical smoke and light effect, triggered it directly beneath the beam out of pure reflexive showmanship, sending a burst of bright orange sparks straight into the Harvester's open underside sensor port. On the bridge, alarms began screaming across every console. "Commander, the beam emitter is malfunctioning," Threll shouted. Feedback interference from multiple unknown sources. Kaelvox stared at the readouts in disbelief. What kind of interference? Costume electronics, drone hardware, and what the sensors are calling theatrical pyrotechnics, Threll said, voice cracking. Commander, I believe we have been damaged by fan merchandise. The beam sputtered, flickered violet, then collapsed entirely, dropping the hovering hot dog cart back to the pavement with a loud, undignified clatter that somehow drew applause from the retreating crowd. The Harvester tilted sideways, trailing smoke, and began drifting toward the open water of the bay. Kaelvox gripped the edge of his console, watching his flagship fail because of a costume contest's leftover battery packs. "Order full retreat," he said finally, his voice flat with defeat. This world is not worth the cost of understanding it. Below, Colonel Whitfield watched the massive ship lift unsteadily and pull away over the water, smoke trailing behind it, and let out a slow breath. "Somebody get me every piece of footage from tonight," he said. "Because nobody at the Pentagon is going to believe this happened at a comic book convention." Frank Dalton, standing nearby, finally allowed himself a small, tired smile. "Told you," he said to no one in particular. No badge, no entry. By the time the sun rose over San Diego the next morning, the Zarnal fleet had already jumped well beyond the edge of the solar system. And Commander Kael'Vox sat alone in his quarters, composing the most difficult report of his career. "Planet Earth," he dictated, his voice heavy with something close to exhaustion. "Region North America, local event, unknown cultural gathering referred to as Comic-Con. Assessment, population does not register overwhelming force as a threat. Population interprets displays of strength as entertainment. Local security demands identification before acknowledging conquest. Recommend permanent avoidance of this region, especially during the specific week when this gathering occurs annually." Threll entered quietly and set down a final data pad. "Fleet Command has reviewed your report, Commander. They have officially classified San Diego as a cultural hazard zone." Kael'Vox nodded slowly. "As it should be." Down on the ground, the convention center reopened its doors as though nothing unusual had happened at all, mostly because, from the perspective of most attendees, nothing unusual actually had. Todd Bennett spent the following morning fielding calls from 3 different studios. Each one convinced a rival had pulled off the greatest guerrilla marketing stunt in convention history. And each one desperate to know which agency had built those costumes. Frank Dalton went back to checking badges at the loading dock, though he did add one new rule to his mental checklist. If anyone else claimed to represent an alien empire, he would at least ask for a name before turning them away. Doug Harmon spent the next several weeks trying to get someone in an official capacity to take his energy readings seriously, and eventually found a surprisingly receptive audience in Colonel Whitfield, who had already filed his own incident report and was in no mood to argue with a man holding actual data. Whitfield's official summary read simply, "Non-hostile incursion resolved through unintentional civilian interference. No further threat detected. Recommend increased monitoring during large public gatherings, particularly those involving costume electronics and unregulated pyrotechnics." His commanding officer read the report twice, looked up at him, and asked if he was joking. Whitfield said no, attached the footage, and let the video speak for itself. The footage, of course, eventually leaked. Within a month, clips of the glowing ship over the harbor and the strange, translated voice from the earlier panel had circulated so widely that most people online simply assumed it was an elaborate viral marketing campaign for a movie that never actually got made, which, in its own strange way, became a legend all its own. Fan theories spread across forums for years, debating who had built the suits, who had voiced the commander, and why the studio never followed up with an actual film. Sarah Collins and Jake Sullivan made it home from that Comic-Con with sunburns, a stack of autographed art prints, and a story about a really committed alien invasion actor that they told at parties for years afterward, never once suspecting how close it had come to being real. The following year, attendance at Comic-Con broke every previous record, driven largely by rumors that the alien panel might make a surprise return. It did not. But somewhere far beyond the edge of the solar system, a single automated warning beacon continued to broadcast on a quiet frequency, repeating the same message in 11 different Zarnal dialects. "Avoid Earth. If contact is unavoidable, avoid North America. If North America is unavoidable, avoid the coastal cities in late July. And if a coastal city in late July is somehow unavoidable, under no circumstances demonstrate a weapon on a stage, because they will simply ask you to do it again for the crowd." Thanks for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed this one, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more stories just like it, and drop a comment telling me which moment made you laugh the hardest. And if you think a friend would enjoy watching an alien invasion get mistaken for a marketing stunt, go ahead and share this with them right now.